Capitol.
Yes, it is beautiful.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to take the time to... Hey, what's that? Yes, I am Major Andrew Ellicott. I'll be down in a minute. I need some time with my surveying assistant up here. Give us a few minutes and I'll be down.
Isn't this a beautiful sight? Can you imagine this as the capital city? And that hill right down there, that would be the perfect site to have a church. And you'd be able to see the spire from anywhere in the city.
Yeah, and that might be Jenkins Hill down there. Let me take a close look. Ah, yes. And that must be Rock Creek there, and coming down from Jenkins Hill is, what is that? What do they call that?
Oh, the Tiber River.
Ha! The Tiber. I don't know why people do that. It's like that little stream up in Ellicott City they like to call the Tiber, and the upper branch the Hudson. But classical references, people always like those.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's going to be a lot of work. I'm going to be expecting you to take care of the astronomical clock and take careful notes and be taking lots of readings at night, so we hope it all goes well.
Well, one of the things that's interesting about this project is that I have to lie down on the ground to take sightings.
Yeah, with the Zenith sector.
And
I'll be
is
helping.
so cold.
I know, why are we just scheduling this in February, really? It was about this time of year we came down here. Kind of like today, we had some real bitter cold days. And way down there, that might be Alexandria. I think that's where we'll be setting up the clock to get our bearings and find the latitude and longitude of this place. Well, we better get going back down the hill and meet up with these people. It might be some of the commissioners coming to greet us. Let's introduce ourselves.
Wasn't that an outstanding performance? Thank you, Benjamin Banneker and Andrew Ellicott. Good afternoon and welcome to the Banneker-Douglass Museum, your official state's museum on African American history and culture. I am Tamara England Wilson, chair of the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. I bring greetings on behalf of our commission, the Banneker-Douglass Museum, and all of our faithful supporters. We begin our celebration today by acknowledging that the land on which we gather this afternoon, here in Annapolis, Maryland, is the traditional territory stolen from the Piscataway people. In our celebration of the history of Andrew Ellicott and Benjamin Banneker's survey of the federal territories, let us also acknowledge that that territory is located on the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Algonquian people. And let us also remember that our nation's capital, the symbol of democracy, was built by the hands of enslaved African Americans. Let us take a moment of silence for the millions of lives who were displaced, lost, and stolen. Thank you. May we all, in some way, continue to do our part to uncover, preserve, and share their untold stories. For over 50 years, the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture has been dedicated to preserving and celebrating African American history and culture in Maryland. As the nation's first state ethnic commission, which operates the state's Museum on African American History and Culture, the state's African American Heritage Preservation Grant, the commission remains to this day unique among the 9 African American commissions, a national model. And events like this one today highlights just how dedicated our commissioners are to preserving our rich history in Maryland. It is truly my honor to unveil today this historic mural that depicts our museum's namesake, Benjamin Banneker, and Maryland history maker, Andrew Ellicott. I remember vividly the meeting the commission elected to pursue the acquisition of this important piece of Maryland's history, following the passionate explanation of its significance from none other than Commissioner Stephen X. Lee. It is because of his efforts, combined with those of the Banneker-Douglass Museum staff, community leaders, and our many supporters, that we have been able to acquire this mural in our museum's collection, which will continue to keep Benjamin Banneker's memory alive. I want to give a special thank you to the family of Chaz Langland, to whom this mural is dedicated, the family of William Arthur Smith, the artist who created the mural, the Maryland Transportation Authority, Lorna Hainsworth, for your contributions and vision, the Banneker-Douglass Museum Foundation, the Banneker-Douglass Museum staff, our donors, and to all of our commissioners, both current and past, who played a role in making this moment possible. I also extend our sincerest gratitude to Maryland's Speaker of the House, the Honorable Adrian Jones. Also to Senator Antonio Hayes, Senator Mary Washington, Delegate Shanika Henson, Delegate Dana Jones, Dr. Martha Blackwell, Linda Gooden, and Laird Lott, excuse me. Thank you all for all that you have done and for those who have joined us today. It is my pleasure to bring to the stage Maryland's Speaker of the House and history maker, the Honorable Adrian Jones. Speaker Jones has shattered not one, but two glass ceilings when she was unanimously elected by the full House of Delegates in 2019 to serve as the first African American and the first woman Speaker of Maryland's House of Delegates. Let's give her a warm welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Take this off. Good afternoon. This is a great day. I recall I live in Baltimore County, and back in 1984, we dedicated the Banneker-Douglass Museum there. And that was a great time. I was on the board, and anytime, I love history, and anytime we can share that together, and look at this audience. This is a very diverse audience. This is the way it should be. What is our commonality? We love history. That's why you're here, and this is a great day. Should I bring these two up? Ms. Lorna Hainsworth, please come forward. I have the honor that I am her delegate. It's a two-part. Let me tell you, if you know Lorna, she's a go-getter. I adopted the road in my district, and there's on all those adopted road, when we were out there doing our best to improve the community, Lorna was there. She had this nice orange outfit, nice orange, what do you call it? What do you call that thing that you had? It's like a tub thing, whatever. Yeah. Well, yeah, I was going to give it more title than that, but yeah, okay. But anyway, she's a good she always cares about others, and we're very appreciative of her contributions. And it's going to be addressed by you. So you can say that first before I do the citation.
On behalf of the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture and the Banneker-Douglass Museum, we'd like to present to you these beautiful flowers.
And the Maryland General Assembly is an official citation, a good kind. Be it hereby known to all that sincerest congratulations are offered to Lorna Hainsworth in recognition of your meaningful contribution towards the conservation and installation of the Andrew Elliott and Benjamin Banneker surveying the boundaries of Washington, D.C. at the Banneker-Douglass Museum, Maryland's official state museum on African American history and culture, in memory of Charles Langland, renowned surveyor, presented on this 5th day of February by yours truly. Here you go. Have a second one. Also from the Maryland General Assembly, an official citation, be it hereby known to all that sincerest congratulations are offered to the Banneker-Douglass Museum in recognition of the preservation and presentation of the Andrew Elliott and Benjamin Banneker surveying the boundaries of Washington, D.C., painted by William Arthur Smith. As the state of Maryland's official museum of African American heritage, your efforts to document and promote African American history and culture are critical to improving the appreciation of Americans' rich cultural diversity for all. And also, again, presented on this 5th day by yours truly. Okay.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. I now invite to the stage Commissioner Stephen X. Lee. Commissioner Lee was appointed to the commission in 2015 by Governor Larry Hogan, representing Baltimore County, bringing with him over 45 years of teaching community art, history and culture, program design and development, museology, and environmental conservation experience with him. He is the author of The Story of Thomas Kearny, a Maryland patriot of the American Revolutionary War. He serves as the project director of programs in history, culture, and the environment at the Heritage Museum, and is the founding director of the Benjamin Banneker Historical Park and Museum in Ellicott City. Commissioner Lee is a force of positive change in the field of historic preservation, and it is my pleasure to present to you him today. Commissioner Lee. And before I hand over the Podium to you, we'd like to present you with a gift. This is signed by the museum staff because we're so appreciative of Commissioner Lee's advocacy to have this historic mural donated to the Banneker-Douglass Museum. We thank you for your leadership and fierceness in the field of African American heritage preservation. Thank you. Okay, let's do it.
Wow. Didn't expect that intro or to follow two heavy hitters in Speaker of the House Jones and Ms. Hainsworth, but I'll do my best. I was asked to give a history of the mural coming here, and if I could describe it in one word, it was a pilgrimage. It was in the summer of 2012, if we can have the first slide, that I first learned of the Maryland House closing, and I was, this newspaper article is from September of 2012, announcing that the murals were being put in storage by the state. And I was immediately concerned about the Banneker-Ellicott mural. I've always been aware of it. It's such an iconic image of Benjamin Banneker throughout the latter part of the last century. And it was featured in this book, the leading biography on Benjamin Banneker. So yes, I was very concerned of its fate. Too few original works of relevant art and artifacts are under the purview of African American art and history institutions. So I took it up as a mission to find an appropriate Black institution as the new home for this image of Maryland's native son. I knew it wouldn't be an easy task. First of all, it would have to be an organization that would have sufficient facility for the work's storage, preservation, and display. Secondly, it would have to be an organization with a mission and vision that would appreciate the significance of this old artwork of the 18th century African Americans. It's not exactly hot, hip, or sexy for these current times. But as I thought of the Banneker-Douglass Museum, a historic namesake institution in the very orbit of our state capital, I couldn't think of a more appropriate site for this mural to dwell. And so then began a multi-year campaign to secure this artwork for an African-American institution in Maryland's capital city. The fate of the Maryland House murals rested in the hands of MTA, Maryland Transportation Authority, and fortunately I came to find a great ally there, Mr. David Green. He was the Director of Business Planning, Policy, and Performance of the office overseeing the murals. He supported the effort to have the mural featuring Banneker acquired by a Black institution. Another key ally was the then director of BDM, the Banneker-Douglass Museum, Dr. Joni Jones, whose vision and commitment for the museum's acquisition was steadfast. We ended up being a work team that together forged 5 long years of ongoing hurdles in the administrative and bureaucratic processes and art protocols that surround this state-owned artwork. Procedures in appraisals and valuation. Next slide. that slide was it being displayed in Maryland House. I'm sorry, I forgot. Can you go back to the other slide? Because they did such a great job on that mural. It's amazing. You can't tell from this slide, but it was very like that antique yellow background that comes with age. And if you notice on the right-hand side, that black spot was a light switch plate in Maryland House. They just did an outstanding job. And they didn't cut it off. They patched that spot. Just really first-rate work. Okay, next slide. This is of the appraisal, and I'm sorry we don't have a sharper image, but this was around 2014, I believe, and the piece was appraised for $40,000, as is. So that means before all this artwork was done, that means 8 years ago. So I'm sure the value, especially now, is at least doubled. So yes, we had the procedures in appraisals and valuation, the painting's cleaning and stabilization, which was done by Page Conservation in Washington, D.C. And that's what this slide is here. You can see Mr. Page, Dr. Joni Jones there, and Mr. Page assistants. And I don't know if you can tell, but at this slide, he's pointing to the very spot where that plate was, and we were determining, what approach to take for it. So we had hearings and legislative approval to go through, and then the formal MTA deassessation to transfer to BDM's acquisition. It was finally in 2016 that we achieved having the mural turned over and in possession of the Banneker-Douglass Museum. That, like this day, was a benchmark and a day of celebration here at the museum. While for the next few years, BDM as a whole underwent a period of planning and redevelopment, including the tenure of 2 subsequent directors, Ms. Maya Davis and our current Ms. Chanel Compton, the mural rested safely in the storage facility. Towards the ultimate goal of a permanent display came the next cause for the mural, with the considerable cost needed for further conservation care, framing, and mounting to make it possible. Fast forward to 2021, the quest and the initiative for its permanent display is spurred and taken up by one valiant Ms. Lorna Hainsworth, which brings us here today. Over the course of my Banneker mural mission these many years, I've been asked by many, why care so much about it? What's so important, relevant about this old mural for us today? Does it not reflect a throwback to old colonialism? And while yes, it does reflect an era of colonialism, it is actually the depiction of 2 men who boldly, defiantly rose above the practices of colonialism in their environment as they made their great contribution to defining a new nation. This was one of the rare and significant instances when early America worked true to its ideals. There have always been moments in Maryland history, in our national history, where people and circumstance, if for but an instance, express the better angels of humanity, where discrimination and racism did not rule the day. It is so important that those moments are also portrayed, cherished in our Maryland public history, and not just those that are of or a reaction to enslavement. I speak of the great legacy of free blacks in Maryland, a history rarely disclosed. It dates back to 1634, with black passengers landing here on the Ark and the Dove, of which Matthias de Sousa was one. Though a servant when he arrived, he was a free man nonetheless, and he progressed to become a representative in the Maryland Assembly. This was in the mid-1600s. He was the first stone in the pathway for our own today's esteemed trailblazer, Speaker of the House of Delegates, Adrian Jones. So too was true for Mr. Banneker as a landowner, mathematician, writer, clockmaker, and scientist. He was a free African-American polymath who personified the inherent equality of all human beings. A prominent icon of this exceptional man should be preserved and presented, and most appropriately through the context of an institution of his community. Too many of the stories of early Maryland's free African Americans have been lost, subordinated, or erased under the dominance of institutions outside of the black community. Two men who boldly, defiantly rose above the practices of colonialism. I should have also added reticently, for neither of them immediately jumped into their partnership, but God works in mysterious ways. Benjamin Banneker was initially apprehensive because he did not know the out-of-towner Andrew Ellicott, and this meant extensive travel to unknown areas with a stranger in winter for an indeterminable amount of time. And Benjamin, living in beautiful pastoral Oella, was definitely a homebody, not one prone to travel far at all. But he had great faith and trust in the recommendation of his best friend, George Ellicott of Ellicott City, who had only shared in and encouraged Banneker's works through the years, and who was now telling him to take this job. And Andrew Ellicott, a most highly recognized surveyor of many land projects for the new states of America back then, initially sought his cousin, George Ellicott, to assist him in the commission to survey the proposed federal territory. But George was otherwise engaged and highly recommended and vouched for his neighbor, Benjamin Banneker, for the position. Andrew Ellicott was a bit leery at first at taking a black man for the position, questioning Banneker's ability and the political hurdles that a black man's appointment would face. But as Quakers, George Ellicott strongly challenged his cousin to live up to the ethics and values of their faith, citing Banneker as more than capable for the job. Andrew Ellicott did prove to meet the challenge, indeed getting the Banneker appointment approved by the highest level of government. Next slide. The two ended up making a splendid team, completing the survey for the federal territory and laying the groundwork for Pierre L'Enfant to be able to later come in and survey the area for the District of Columbia. And it's sometimes confused, but they're two different surveys. The Banneker-Ellicott survey was the federal territory, which extends beyond the District of Columbia, and that had to first be defined. Pierre L'Enfant defined the District of Columbia within the federal territory. So the Banneker-Ellicott, or the Ellicott-Banneker, however you want to see it, survey had to happen first. There is one newspaper article known to have mentioned Banneker while he was on the job surveying the territory. It was the Wednesday, April 6, 1791 edition of the Essex Journal and New Hampshire Packet. I'm going to read a bit of it. Sometime last month arrived in this town Mr. Andrew Ellicott, a gentleman of superior astronomical abilities. He was employed by the President of the United States to lay off a tract of land 10 miles square on the Potomac for the use of Congress, is now engaged in this business and hopes to soon accomplish the object of his mission. He is attended by Benjamin Banneker, an Ethiopian whose abilities as a surveyor and an astronomer clearly prove that Mr. Jefferson's concluding that race of men were void of mental endowments was entirely without foundation. 1791. I mean, can you appreciate how bold it was to make such a statement, especially about someone like Thomas Jefferson? And I think that highlights Andrew Ellicott's character to have chosen Benjamin Banneker after all. I'm often asked why they call him an Ethiopian, and I always ask people to consider that Ethiopia, the land, Kush, was not called that until around the 1900s, but the term Ethiop or Ethiopian has been used for many hundreds of years. You can even find it in Shakespeare, and it is not referring to the country. It is a word that means burnt face or burnt skin. So it's not a national reference. Now, Banneker was about 60 years old at the time, and that winter of 1791 was brutal, with him doing a job that required out-of-doors work in the day and the night. His health began to fail, and immediately after completing his task, he gladly returned home to Owella. Nonetheless, this dynamic duo did indeed survey and define the land of our nation's federal territory, and the 4 landmark cornerstones that Banneker and Ellicott laid down. They're in the counties, I think, Fairfax, Prince George's County, and Montgomery County, and one more that escapes me, are there to be found to this very day. And I think in Ms. Hainsworth's excellent exhibit, I think you have a map of the various stones there. Yeah, so please do take a look at it. Great exhibit, by the way. Thank you. And so it is indeed most fitting for this hallmark moment in the American experience, featuring the most exemplary African American of the time, a Marylander, working with a leading, forward-thinking European American of the time, together creating a framework for a new America to be displayed here in the museum of our great state's capital city, that all, and especially our youths, may be reminded that our America from way back then can work for our equality, and that today we must continue the work to make it be. I salute the efforts of today's dynamic duo, Ms. Hainsworth and Director Compton, in achieving this great moment in the display recognizing our history. Thank you.
Big hoops on. I'm gonna take them off. How's everyone doing? Good? Can we get a round of applause for our second interpreter of the evening? So I want to get started. Well, first of all, my name is Chanel Compton, and I serve as the Executive Director for the Banneker-Douglass Museum, your state museum on African American history and culture, and the Maryland Commission on African American history and culture. And before I begin my remarks, I first want to recognize our curator of collections and exhibitions. This woman led in the management of the conservation, framing, and installation of this historic mural, Miss Shalisa Howard. I also want to recognize Sabria Hassan. Is she here? Sabria's like running around, but she's our programs director, and she is responsible for bringing to life the life and legacy of Benjamin Banneker and our other namesake, of course, Frederick Douglass, through our youth and community programs. Mr. LaRon Herbert, who is the special assistant to the commission and our administrative manager, he keeps our building going, Mr. Herbert. Mr. Herbert is responsible for our docent and volunteer programs, and he is the front face of our museum's hospitality services. So please come back to your state's museum to enjoy our tours and our programs. So thank you. As Maryland's official state museum on African American history and culture, our mission is to preserve, to present, and to celebrate Maryland's African American history, art, and culture. Our museum is operated by the Maryland Commission on African American history and culture. Our commission, our community partners, donors, volunteers dedicate their time and resources to make our educational programs, collections, exhibitions, and special events like this historic mural unveiling possible. The Banneker-Douglass Museum preserves the history of African American pioneers in social justice and civil rights history. Benjamin Banneker, our museum's namesake, was a man of science and spoke out against the injustice and the enslavement of Black people in America. In fact, in 1791, he wrote a letter to Thomas Jefferson, then Secretary of State and principal author of the Declaration of Independence. Banneker states, "But, sir, how pitiable is it to reflect that although you were so fully convinced of the benevolence of the Father of mankind and of his equal and impartial distribution of those rights and privileges, which he had conferred upon them, that you should at the same time counteract his mercies, entertaining by fraud and violence so numerous a part of my brethren under groaning, captivity, and cruel oppression, that you should at the same time be found guilty of that most criminal act, which you professedly detested in others, with respect to yourselves. So I say to all of you in the room, and for those that are joining online, that let Benjamin Banneker's words and legacy serve as inspiration for all of us to continue the work towards the long overdue freedom and equality and reparations for African Americans." I'm like, we can clap to that. Getting back to the mural unveiling. Together, look at what we have accomplished. The conservation and permanent installation of the Andrew Ellicott and Benjamin Banneker mural right here at Maryland State Museum. So I'd like to tell you a story. You heard the stories from our illustrious chair, Dr. Tamara Wilson, and Commissioner Lee about their experience with the mural. Well, here's my story, here's my take. When I first started at the museum, my first month, I met with Commissioner Lee, and he told me about the Andrew Ellicott and Benjamin Banneker mural that was currently in our collections, and he told me why it was so important for it to be publicly and permanently displayed at our museum. It wasn't a hard sell, as our namesake, Benjamin Banneker's life and legacy, needed more visual prominence at our institution. We strategized on a plan for an installation, applied for grant funding, didn't get the grant, and then a global pandemic happened, and our plan seemed to get pushed further and further back. Then came Lorna Hainsworth. Lorna had been in search of the mural for quite some time, and when she heard it was at the Banneker-Douglass Museum, she reached out to us and she wanted to help. Well, we met, and what struck me about Lorna was that she wanted to dedicate this project to her dear friend and known surveyor, Chaz Langland. Lorna has a true love of her friends. She has a true love of surveying, research, and history. For many of you that know Lorna, you know that her passion is infectious. She has the energy of a millennial. I would say a Gen Zer, but okay, it's debatable. She's focused, she is a historian and author, and she is an adventurer. She gives with her heart, and it was my honor to work with you, Ms. Hainsworth, on this project. In our last meeting, Lorna gave me this poem, which she didn't know that I was gonna read tonight or today, but I'm full of surprises. It's entitled The Bridge Builder by William Allen Dromgoole, and I'm gonna read it. An old man going a lone highway came at the evening cold and gray to a chasm vast and deep and wide, through which was flowing a sullen tide. The old man crossed in the twilight dim. The sullen stream had no fear for him, but he turned when safe on the other side and built a bridge to span the tide. Old man, said a fellow pilgrim near, you are wasting your strength building here. Your journey will end with the ending day. You never again will pass this way. You've crossed the chasm deep and wide. Why build this bridge at evening tide? The builder lifted his old gray head. Good friend, in the path I have come, he said, there followed after me today a youth whose feet must pass this way. This chasm that has been as naught to me, to that fair-haired youth may a pitfall be. So two must cross in the twilight dim. Good friend, I am building this bridge for him. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce the bridge builder herself, Miss Lorna Hainsworth.
This is quite a day, folks. And you know, I got to thinking, what word could I use to describe how I feel today? And that one word is gratitude. I'm so grateful that the Maryland Archives put on a program last June. They did a Zoom presentation. And in that Zoom presentation, Catherine Arthur was talking about the various different murals that had originally been at the Maryland House and the ones that are in her possession or in her keeping. And she mentioned that the Ellicott Banneker mural was here at the museum. And I said, oh my God, I've been trying to find what happened to this mural for the last decade. And now I know where it is. I am so glad that the archives put on that program. I am equally glad that Commissioner Lee put in all the effort. He told me the story of what it took to get that mural to this museum, and believe me, folks, it was a long and arduous journey, but I truly appreciate all the efforts that he made. I'm grateful that the museum was willing to take on this project, to restore this mural, to display it, and to dedicate it to my friend. I also want to express particular thanks to Chanel Compton. She has worked tirelessly on this program. She has worked with enormous dedication, and it has been just absolutely wonderful working with Chanel. She's a great person. She has made this day a reality. I also want to thank every individual and organization that contributed to the restoration and display of this mural. Those contributions are extremely important, and they are very much appreciated. And I also want to thank all of you for coming today to participate in this really extraordinary event. But what tops my list of the things that I'm grateful for is I'm grateful that Chaz was my friend. He was by far and away one of the best friends that I have ever had. And I am so pleased that the mural is dedicated to him. Chaz and I would go lots of places together and do lots of things together. And every time I was with him, it was just such a lot of fun. We would have these great conversations. Well, I guess to the outside listener, it sounded like shouting matches. But that was because we'd get so enthusiastic about what we had to say to each other that we ended up hollering at each other. But we were always laughing while we did it. I truly wish that all of you could have known Chaz like I did. But to that end, what you'll find on the table is a sheet that tells you facts about Chaz. I would like for each one of you to take one of these with you. That way you can get to know my friend a little bit better. Also, after the program, I invite all of you to go out on the landing and look at the display that's there. Because what you're going to see are awards that were given to Chaz, instruments that he collected, articles that he wrote, programs that he presented. As a matter of fact, on the back side of this sheet, you will see a website. And when you go to that website, you will be able to watch a talk that Chaz gave on the survey of Washington, D.C., and he did that at the Library of Congress. You're also going to see pictures in the display. Now, one of the pictures, or a couple of the pictures you're going to see, is of an old 1981 pickup truck. Well, I got to tell you, folks, Chaz was a superior surveyor, but he was a right good mechanic as well. My old truck, he took and he, as far as I'm concerned, breathed life back into it. He made that truck roadworthy. I have driven that truck all kinds of places and never worried for a second that, you know, a hose was going to break down or that the linkage was going to lock up. He took care of my truck and he made it run really, really well. So again, I want to thank all of you for being here today. I am so pleased that this mural has been dedicated to my friend. Thank you. That's what happens when you get emotional. I would like to now take the opportunity to introduce Tim Birch. Now, Tim is the Executive Director for the National Society of Professional Surveyors. And Tim has something really special to share with you. So Tim, if you would come on up here, I would love to have you tell us what you got to say.
Well, besides, wow, I wasn't expecting this. This is phenomenal. But I shouldn't jump off script just yet. There's a phrase that gets repeated in many of our professional surveyor meetings and conferences. It's a great day to be a surveyor. Today is no exception. Every year on March 21st, a professional surveying association is tasked with picking a global surveyor of the year. For 2022, the National Society of Professional Surveyors was selected to choose a person with a historical surveying background to be named to this prestigious honor. My name is Tim Birch, and I'm the Executive Director of National Society of Professional Surveyors, an association here in the U.S. that provides advocacy for the surveying profession across the nation. After thorough consideration, NSPS has chosen Benjamin Banneker for our selection as the 2022 Global Surveyor of the Year. This selection was brought before our NSPS Board of Directors during our spring 2021 meeting and passed with a majority vote. While Banneker's career as a surveyor was limited in time and experience, his additional contributions to math, science, astronomy, and publication of a groundbreaking almanac have earned him a significant place in American history. We also selected Banneker because of his ability to overcome the adversity of being a free black man in early colonial America. Through much self-teaching, he was able to excel at the contributions previously listed in a period when blacks were not accepted for their educational abilities. The selection committee chose Mr. Banneker over, there's 3 presidents on Mount Rushmore who were surveyors, and Henry David Thoreau. You might have heard of him, he's an author. The committee felt that Mr. Banneker's contributions, not just to the surveying profession, made him deserve this honor, but his total body of work in a time when men like him were not accepted as capable human beings. Our world needs more people like Benjamin Banneker and would be a much better place because of them. Speaking of capable human beings, we're also here to honor Mr. Chaz Langland, a fellow surveyor who spent most of his professional life keeping the historical aspects of surveying alive through his involvement and activities. Our profession is forever grateful for his contributions to our livelihood. NSPS is a proud contributor to the Ellicott Banneker mural and would like to thank Chanel, her staff, of course Lorna, Mr. David Doyle, the Maryland Society of Surveyors, and the District of Columbia Society of Surveyors for this wonderful hospitality and having NSPS included as part of this marvelous event. I personally would also like to thank Dr. Janet Barber for her time and insight, additionally into Mr. Banneker's life and accomplishments. Her help has been phenomenal in further solidifying how magnificent a life Mr. Banneker lived. We thank you again for this invitation to the museum and an opportunity to honor this wonderful man. And with that, we have a few gifts for a few special people. This is the print that was created. Actually, this one was just specifically for this event today. It's a version of the Global Surveyor of the Year Award that will it will hang in the Central European office in full display in their art section. But we decided to make one very, very special for this museum. Depicts Mr. Banneker on the wonderful stamp. It depicts some of his handwritten notes from his astronomical calculations, his almanac, and one of the boundary stones he was part of, all overlaid on a map that was heritage to what the two of these gentlemen did. So, as Global Surveyor of the Year 2022, hereby dedicated February 5th, 2022, in the memory of Chaz Langland. We present this to the museum.
Don't leave.
Actually, that copy can be for the museum. Chanel, this one is for you and the staff.
Thank you.
I won't make her come back up here, but Lorna, this one's for you. And we also have one for the family of Chaz Langland. And once again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. This is a wonderful event. I'm just blown away that we were able to, what we thought was choosing a very appropriate man to help represent surveying. And the further we got to digging into it, this was just a fantastic man to start with. So thank you again.
Before we close, we're going to have one last presentation by Benjamin Banneker and Andrew Ellicott.
I'm here to represent one part of the picture, Andrew Ellicott, and I'd like to tell you a few special details about his life, my life. But first I want to talk with my hat off as Steve Villano for a bit and tribute to Chaz. I didn't know him very well, but for the amount of time I had the pleasure of seeing him, I was most impressed with the scope of his knowledge and his enthusiasm. At the Banneker Historical Park and Museum, where I met him at the Colonial Market Fair, he led a crew of surveyors with all sorts of great equipment, and he was always ready to explain everything about the equipment. And I heard him speak about Georgetown plats and DC boundary stones at the time, and I found him very organized and entertaining. I liked that he dressed up in his great surveying outfit. He had a great outfit to add vitality to the show. And I'm wearing my outfit today in honor of the sharing he was able to do. I only hope I can make at least half as good a presentation as he was always able to do. Chaz, I'm thinking of you, and I hope to carry on in your spirit of making history come alive as much as I am able. I'm also here to honor Major Andrew Ellicott, and I want to take a few words about him and about the Ellicotts in general as I'm representing. The mill town where they founded is celebrating its 250th anniversary this coming year. EC 250 committee is planning a whole lot of special events, which will include Mr. Banneker. In a couple weeks, they'll be opening an Ellicott Legacy exhibit at the Howard County Historical Society Museum. One of the items on display is an original copy of the large journal that he wrote after his big surveying trip that started in 1797, went down the Ohio to the Mississippi and cut across the woods for the southern border at that time with Spain. So there's a lot of detail in that. One of the things I like about it, you can read it online. The appendix has all these details so you can learn what he did in our modern world. And it's excellent that since history like this is kept alive, and I wish you had as much details about the survey of DC, but maybe there's some I don't know about as yet. So let me tell you a little bit about myself as Andrew might. My grandfather, another Andrew, was born in Devon, England, and came here as a young man ostensibly for a visit with his father to a community of Quakers in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And they both ended up staying after he fell in love with a young woman here, Ann Bye. They had 5 sons. My father, Joseph, was the oldest, but their dad died before he was 10 years old, of pleurisy. And so these 5 sons were taken into trades by the Quaker community, who took them in He ended up marrying a miller's daughter. He was very interested in mechanics and ambitious. And about the time I, Andrew Ellicott, was born, he undertook to build a mill for his guardian, Samuel Armitage, getting his brothers to all help. So they all became trained in milling. And after that, he was looking for a place to build new mills and explored opportunities in Maryland. A big event in his life, and ultimately mine and Benjamin's in a way, came when he got news of an inheritance from his father's family in England where his family had left. And in 1766, he went back there to claim the inheritance in Devon, and then went to London, introduced himself out of the blue to a clockmaker to the king, a John Ellicott, who was actually a distant relative. But a curious connection is that John Ellicott built the regulator clock that Mason and Dixon used when they measured the transit of Venus. And as you know, later they came to this country to mark the famous line which went west until they ran into Indians and had to break it up for a while. So while in London, John introduced Joseph to his friend James Ferguson, a famous popularizer of astronomy. And it was Ferguson's books that my cousin George later lent to Benjamin Banneker to begin his detailed study of astronomy. So there's a connection there. So my dad came back from England with all sorts of new tools and ideas for clockmaking. When I was just 15 years old, he helped me help him build a wonderful four-sided standing clock that's here in the Smithsonian now. And one face was a normal clock face. Others showed positions of all the planets, as in an orrery. Another face had 24 tunes that it would play at different hours. And we moved down to Ellicott Mills with my dad and this clock around 1775. I became a major in a battalion at Elk Ridge, rejecting some of my Quaker heritage pacifism for this war. So coming down to Maryland, a slave state, was a bit of a change for my Quaker family, but we were against slavery, opposing as we could, and we came to know there were a lot of free men of color living in Maryland, in fact landowners. Most remarkable was the man Benjamin Banneker, who had nearly 100 acres of land up the hill from the lower mills. So we'll get back to Benjamin in a moment, but my own break in surveying came when I was commissioned after the war by Virginia to help with the extension of the Mason-Dixon line in 1784. And I got to meet some other famous astronomers, and other commissions followed. One great journey was to see Niagara Falls with my two brothers. I had moved to Philadelphia by the time the survey request came for the federal territory. So at that time, my two brothers were still surveying in western New York, and asked my cousin George if he could help the survey of D.C. George claimed to be too busy with his business, but recommended Benjamin Banneker, who had been undertaking lots of study in astronomy with James Ferguson's books, which George had lent him. I was honored to bring him and introduce this honorable man of African descent to others in the survey. But Benjamin is here today, so let him tell you about himself.
Thank you for being here today. This is a very special occasion. I think that what I'd really like to say is my grandmother Molly was falsely accused of stealing some milk in England and was sentenced to die. She had one chance to save her life. She could call for the book. You see, if you could prove that you could read, your life would be spared. She called for the book, it was brought and opened, and she began to read. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. Her life was spared. She was sent to this country as an indentured servant. That's sort of a form of slavery, except it has a term. And at the end of that term, you regain your freedom. My grandmother remembered what it was like to lose her freedom and what it was like to regain it. And she remembered that the key thing was that she knew how to read. So she made sure that all of her children, her daughters, knew how to read. She made sure that all of her grandchildren, including me, knew how to read. You see, if you know how to read, you can learn how to do anything. And I used that ability to reach out. And when George Ellicott presented me with books about astronomy, I studied those. When I learned about surveying, I read about it, and I learned how to do those things. But as my grandmother had been an indentured servant, my father and my grandfather had been enslaved, people who came from Africa. And I wanted to show that given the opportunity, a descendant of Africa can do anything that anyone else can. As long as you can read and you have access to books. I even wrote a poem. Behold, ye Christians, and in pity see these Afric sons that nature formed free. Behold them in a country rich, possessed of nature's bounty, see them richly blessed. Behold them herefrom torn by cruel force and doomed to slavery without remorse. This act, America, thy sons have known. This cruel act, remorseless, they have done. I met many, many good friends. And I learned from all of them. And I hope that I was able to teach them some things also. And even though it has been wonderful being part of this survey, what I want to do now is to go back home to my farm. I am a farmer, and at heart I will always be a farmer. It helps to grow living things, not just plants, but people. Thank you very much for naming me the Surveyor of the Year. It's a great honor.
Like I'm always carrying this thing around.
Yes.
Benjamin, I've been looking for you. Now that they've had that ceremony with the cornerstone, I have a chance to get away from the city a bit, and I want to get back to Philadelphia and visit my family and my wonderful wife. And on my way, I could plan to go through the lower mills, and I was wondering if you would like to travel back with me.
I most certainly would. It's a great opportunity, and it's safe passage.
And yeah, I wanted to apologize. I know some of my friends in the surveying group have been teasing you with puzzles a lot, and I hope that hasn't been a bother, but I understand they're very impressed with your work with them.
I'll tell you, it hasn't been a bother at all. It's given me an opportunity to learn some new things. Life is always for learning.
Yes, and we've all learned a lot, and one other thing. I hear you have been working on your almanac some while you're down here for next year. And
well, you know, I completed an almanac for 1 year, and I tried to get it published and had no luck whatsoever. First publisher told me that, or the printer said, no one knows who Benjamin Banneker is. They'll not pay for an almanac by Benjamin Banneker. And the next one said he'd be happy to publish the almanac, but I'd have to pay him for it first. Now, I couldn't afford to do that. So I sent it to a third printer, who also told me he'd be happy to print it if I could pay him, which I could not do. But this year, I have some help. The members of the Pennsylvania Anti-Slavery Society want to prove that given the opportunity, a man from Africa can do anything that anyone else can. So they have agreed to pay to have my almanac published. Not only that, once they said that they would do that, I found a printer, not just in Pennsylvania, but in Maryland, Virginia, and Delaware, and my almanac, hopefully, will go on for years and years.
Yeah. I understand they're competing for bids for your almanac now and trying to get the rights to the publication. So, yeah, and I heard also that you're intending to send a handwritten copy of this almanac to the person who hired us for this survey, Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson.
Yes.
I think that's a good thing to do.
Along with a letter.
A letter? You're thinking what to say to him?
Yes, to say that he should not be holding people from Africa in bondage. But we've already heard that letter, so I don't have to repeat it.
It's a message that bears repeating, but not right now. So, yeah, I've got to get back to packing my stuff soon, and I'll meet up with you.
Yes,
And
yes.
wish you all the best in all these efforts. And so, oh look, there's a ship coming down up the Potomac again. What is that?
I did not mean to cut them short. Wasn't that fantastic? I don't care how old you are, okay? Everyone loves a reenactment. So another round of applause for Benjamin Banneker and Andrew Ellicott. So as we close, I'd like to thank everyone who supported this event, the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture, our dear friend Lorna Hainsworth, the National Society of Professional Surveyors, the Langland family, the Smith family, the Maryland Transit Authority, all of the friends in our donor family, our guests here tonight, and those that have joined virtually, thank you. You can also enjoy the museum exhibitions before you leave today and the beautiful display that celebrates the life and legacy and work of Chaz Langland and our newly installed Andrew Ellicott and Benjamin Banneker surveying the boundaries of Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you.